305 runs that they need.
Even if it does rain here at the Oval, I am absolutely certain it can't surely rain to the extent that we saw at Spa yesterday for the sprint race at the Belgian Grand Prix, when the track was at one point quite literally flooded. You could see water like a geyser coming up from the side of the track. It's been like that all weekend, and we have got full commentary of the Belgian Grand Prix proper coming up in just under 10 minutes time. Max Verstappen's won the last 7 races. He's 110 points clear at the top of the drivers' standings, and Red Bull are on a record 12 race winning streak. But it is Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari starting on pole after the penalty for Verstappen after his team exceeded the gearbox allowance. Let's bring in our commentary team again. The former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, Jack Aitken, former Williams reserve driver, and commentator Harry Benjamin. And Harry, we don't need to look for drama at Spa. We normally find it.
That is absolutely correct, Steve. I mean, everybody loves Spa. It's one of the iconic tracks on the calendar. It's incredibly historic, and we've seen some absolutely brilliant races there over the past. In fact, we had a sprint race yesterday as well. It's one of the sprint weekends that Formula One is bringing for this season, and a shortened race, and it was, as you allude to, conditions all over the shop. Just started raining before the lights went out, and we got some fantastic racing in the mixed conditions. Even in qualifying, it started wet and it got drier and drier. It's such a technical track. It's an incredibly fast track as well, that no matter what, you're going to see some wheel-to-wheel racing, overtakes galore. I can't wait.
We've spoken so much about Max Verstappen now, and you're probably, let's be honest, going to be speaking a lot more about him for the next hour and a half. So let's leave him behind for a second, just like he's leaving everybody behind in the drivers' standings. One of the outstanding performing teams of late is probably McLaren with their 2 drivers, the British driver, young driver Lando Norris, and Australia's Oscar Piastri. Of the 2 of them, Jack, who has been impressing you the most?
Ooh, that's a tough one. They've both been immensely impressive, because you can see they're getting the most out of that car, because they're so close to each other on times every weekend now, since they brought that upgrade package, first with Lando and then subsequently with Oscar, once they had enough parts for both cars. And when you see 2 drivers, 2 teammates so close to each other all the time, that's generally indicative that they are getting the most out of the machinery. And it's quite rare, actually, to see teammates so well matched over multiple tracks. And Oscar in particular, it has to be said, as a rookie coming in and going up against Lando Norris, who has been one of the hot things since he made it onto the grid, is quite impressive.
It's been really impressive, and especially this weekend, hasn't it? I mean, actually, here in Spa, in these mixed conditions, it's been Oscar Piastri who seems the most comfortable of the 2 McLaren drivers, outpacing the slightly more experienced Lando Norris all weekend, and having a wonderful afternoon yesterday in the sprint, battling with Max Verstappen and ending up finishing second. So, yeah, McLaren generally as a team in a really strong place, and with 2 really good drivers, the future's looking quite bright.
Harry, obviously, teams improve over the course of a season. They get upgrades and, different packages, and they improve and they change, and sometimes they get loads better, sometimes they don't get any better, sometimes they get worse. My understanding, though, is that the main thing that's helping McLaren is not their upgrades, it's the lengths they're going to stop the Nico Rosberg curse.
I believe they have put a sign up outside of their garage with Nico Rosberg's face on it, which says no entry and no selfies whatsoever. Every time Rosberg has taken a selfie in front of any car on the grid before a race, or if it's in the garage, that team or car hasn't done particularly well. He's aware of this curse, but I think he still carries on doing it anyway.
Brilliant.
Such does Nico love the drama of it all. But you're quite right, forget the upgrades, just get Nico Rosberg in front or behind a camera, and you might be fine, you might be not.
It's the new Drake curse, isn't it? You remember that from a few years ago? If Drake had a photo with you, your sporting performance absolutely went through the floor. Right, who else, Mark, should we be looking out for then? Let's take the McLarens and take Max out of the equation for a second.
Well, I think one of the interesting dynamics ahead of this afternoon's race is going to be the battle. Whether it'll be a battle is perhaps part of the question. Sergio Perez, who starts second on the grid. We know he's in what we have to say is the fastest car, because we can see what it can do in the hands of Max Verstappen. He starts second with his teammate Verstappen back in 6th. Now, I think most people expect Max Verstappen, should he get through turn 1 cleanly, and that's a big if, but if he does, how long will it be before he comes up against Sergio Perez? You've got to say most of the other cars are slower than that Red Bull, but when he comes up against Perez, well, that's a car with equal speed down the straights. I still think he'll find his way past, but I'm interested to see how far Perez gets his elbows out.
Yeah, it's a loaded topic, isn't it? Because Perez has been under a lot of pressure lately in the last few races, with the reappearance of Daniel Ricciardo and the reshuffling of drivers happening at the sister team AlphaTauri, and some serious questions being raised over Perez's performance with a series of crashes, unforced errors, and just a general lack of pace, where earlier in the year he was really saying to everyone that he wanted to be challenging Max for the World Championship. I don't think many people really believed that he would be able to do that, and that is what has turned out to be the case. And Helmut Marko, one of the bosses at Red Bull, was even quoted as saying earlier this weekend, well, now that he's got that silly idea out of his head, maybe he'll actually start performing as he should, and continuing to be second in the World Championship. So that's really what they're looking from Perez, is to be an efficient number 2.
And Jack, just before we get underway, I'm afraid it falls to you to get the difficult question again here. Is Sergio Perez, is his situation with Red Bull almost done now? Can he still turn it around? And if he can, does it have to be starting this weekend?
I don't think it's done, because as Red Bull have said many times, they have a contract until 2024. It doesn't mean that he's guaranteed the seat, but they're looking for someone to partner with Max to support him, and Perez is absolutely capable of doing that. He's shown that in the past, so he just needs a clean race weekend under his belt and a solid performance, hopefully a podium.
Right, choice of listening right now on 5 Live. It's another brilliant summer afternoon of sport on the radio here. If you go over to 5 Sports Extra, you'll be able to hear full commentary of England versus Australia here at the Oval in the final Ashes test. Jonathan Agnew, our correspondent, and the team there watching as Australia continue to frustrate England at the moment. They're 82 for no loss. They need just over 300 runs, 302 now for victory, and they've got a day and just under a half to do it. So that's on 5 Sports Extra. Here on 5 Live, though, full commentary of the Belgian Grand Prix at Spa, one of the highlights of the whole F1 season. Your commentary team, Jack Aitken, Mark Priestley and Harry Benjamin.
Thanks very much, Steve. We are just about set and ready then for the 12th race of the Formula One season. There isn't any rain in the air right now. The clouds are looming, but only a 40% chance of it at the moment in a weekend that has been a bit of a washout. We've had action, though, left, right and centre. It's been a sprint race weekend as well, but that is all done and dusted. The sun starts to peek through the clouds and blue sky appears. All the cars are lining up on the grid, and they are just about to set off for their formation lap. While we've got a bit of time, Mark, 1, 2, 3 prediction.
Oh, straight in there. Okay, I'm going to go.
We've got to do it now, haven't we?
Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton.
Jack?
Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton.
And I'm going to go Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc. I think that's a fair enough shout, isn't it? Well, look, the grid is starting to be cleared, as we have for the first time. We've not seen them in too much time. The soft compound of tyre, the slick tyres being fitted to the majority of the cars on this track. We will run you through the grid in just a few moments, but for the time being, it is time for the Belgian Grand Prix. And this is how the grid looks. It's his 20th career pole for Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. Alongside him on the front row will be Sergio Perez in the Red Bull, his first front row in 7 races. Third is Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes. Behind him, it's Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari, the highest driver in the standings without a podium finish to his name. Oscar Piastri has been on fire this weekend and had the better of his teammate Lando Norris so far. He starts in the top 5. Max Verstappen in 6th with a grid penalty, with work to do to get up to first place. He will start in front of Lando Norris. George Russell lacking a bit of pace so far compared to his teammate this weekend, is in 8th. Alonso pirouetted into the barriers in yesterday's sprint, starts from 9th today for the Grand Prix in front of his teammate Lance Stroll. Yuki Tsunoda is 11th. Pierre Gasly finished 3rd in the sprint yesterday. It's 12th to start in the Grand Prix today for the Alpine man in front of Bottas in the Alfa Romeo. Esteban Ocon in his Alpine will go from 14th, and the top 15 is rounded out by Alex Albon in the Williams. Kevin Magnussen has a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Leclerc in qualifying, So his Haas starts in 16th. Zhou Guanyu in the Alfa Romeo is 17th. Logan Sargent-Williams is 18th. And last on the grid will be Daniel Ricciardo in 19th in the Alfa Tauri after his best lap time was deleted in qualifying. Nico Hülkenberg qualified plumb last, but Haas have elected to change all sorts of elements in that car, so he will start from the pit lane. So those are your 20 runners and riders that will take the start of this Belgian Grand Prix, the 12th race of the season. We're in Spa-Francorchamps in the Belgian Ardennes countryside to the east of Belgium, close to the borders of Germany and the Netherlands. It is dry out on track. We are surrounded by the forest. We're in a bit of a bowl here in Spa as Max Verstappen starting down in 6th. His teammate Sergio Perez on the front row behind Leclerc, making their way down to the bus stop chicane now. Mark, what is the plan, I suppose, for the start for at least Perez on the front row?
Perez has got the opportunity here to get his elbows out. There's a good run along that Kemmel straight once they've negotiated the first couple of corners where he's got a faster car than the Ferrari in front of him. If he can stay out of trouble, he might be able to slipstream his way into front by the time they get halfway around this lap. For Verstappen, though, it's going to be all about staying out of trouble into turn 1. He's right in the mix down in 6th place. That's one of the most dangerous places to be because it's a real pinch point, so he's got to be careful.
And Jack, as they all start to slow down and bunch up as they make their way uphill through the bus stop chicane and on the grid, what are the drivers doing in the cockpit right now as they get ready for the start?
So Charles Leclerc, he's looking in his mirrors, he's trying to get the field as compressed as possible so that he doesn't have to sit on pole position waiting for ages and ages for everyone to line up behind him. They're all doing their very data-driven, prescribed number of burnouts right now. Even I've had 2.5 asked of me before, and I'm not joking. So they'll do those, get the car into neutral, select the launch maps that they need to be in for the start, and just generally make sure that everything is as it should be for the start of this race.
Well, Daniel Ricciardo in his Alfa Tauri is making his way up through the bus stop chicane now. He will be the final driver on this grid. Nico Hülkenberg from the pit lane. Max Verstappen leads the drivers' standings from Sergio Perez and Fernando Alonso. Red Bull lead the constructors ahead of Mercedes, Aston Martin and Ferrari, with McLaren also involved in that fierce fight for second. And we have 19 cars on the grid, one in the pit lane, Leclerc on pole, Perez alongside. It's all eyes to the lights and foot to the floor as we go racing in Spa for the Belgian Grand Prix. A decent start from Leclerc. Perez is trying to find a way through but gets bulldozed out. It's a pinch point into the source. The McLaren of Piastri and the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz come dangerously close to contact. There might even be a little bit of wheel-to-wheel contact, but up as they head through Eau Rouge, Leclerc leads from Perez, and there is damage to one of the McLarens who goes slow up through Eau Rouge, just about manages to get out of the way but has to pull off the track. Up front though, the lead being taken from Leclerc. Perez sidles through into the braking zone down the end of the Kemmel straight. Sergio Perez, after 3 corners, is up into the lead.
Well, that's exactly what we said could happen along that long straight. Sergio Perez getting in the slipstream of the Ferrari, and further back his teammate Max Verstappen does exactly the same to the sister Ferrari, getting ahead of him, and that puts Verstappen already up to P5.
Yeah, it was a really, really hectic start, as we imagined it would be into La Source. Piastri almost ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time. He didn't want to be on the inside of that corner, pinched by the Ferrari, but it was too late. He couldn't get out. He couldn't slow the car down any further, and he got collected and had that damage.
Yeah, well, he was Piastri who did sustain damage, and he has dropped right to the back of the field. So an absolute disaster for Oscar Piastri and his McLaren. He was going toe-to-toe with the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, who's also reporting on the radio with damage. Sainz is still running though, currently registering as being in 5th. Max Verstappen, our championship leader, dominating this season so far, started in 6th, and he has made his way up into 4th as we approach the end of lap 1. Perez leads Leclerc, Hamilton, Verstappen and Sainz the top 5. Alonso, Norris, Tsunoda, Stroll, Albon getting himself up into the top 10. Russell, Bottas, Ocon, Zhou, Sargent the top 15. Gasly, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Ricciardo and Piastri 20th and last.
Yeah, we do see the damage. Carry on for now.
There you go, that is the radio of Carlos Sainz with his engineer just telling him to continue. So as they complete the first lap and make their way into lap 2, Max Verstappen did exactly what he needed to do. Got through turn 1 unscathed, patiently made his way past the first hampered Ferrari of the damaged car of Carlos Sainz, and now up underneath the rear wing of Lewis Hamilton. That'll be his next target. Hamilton right behind Leclerc, and Leclerc just 1 second behind Sergio Perez, of course, with no DRS just yet.
Down the Kemmel Straight, though, and Alex Albon in the Williams is a man on a mission. He was hounding the back of Lance Stroll's Aston Martin, and as they came onto the Kemmel Straight, as you say, Mark, no DRS, but that straight line speed advantage that Williams just has rockets past Albon up into 9th, just in front of Stroll in 10th. It's been a great start as well for the likes of Yuki Tsunoda, up in 8th from 11th, as they try and settle into a bit of a rhythm now, Jack.
Yeah, and we've got Piastri on the side of the road in the end of Sector 2. It looks like on the exit of the Piff Paff chicane, and they're going to have to try and collect that car. It is in a potentially dangerous spot. Double yellow flags out, and we've got the leaders coming through now. They have to slow down for a double yellow. You have to show that you've lifted. You can't just stop overtaking. And we're going to see a replay now of the race start. So we see the green flag wave, lights out, a good launch from Leclerc from pole position. Perez immediately chops off Hamilton to force him to the outside line. Sainz locks up, he dives to the inside, but Piastri's already there, and he gets tangled on the rear right corner of the Ferrari, gets that puncture and front wing damage, and we're going to go on board with him now. And it's a good launch, good reaction to the lights. He's just shaping up to be on the inside of Sainz, and he thinks he's got loads of space when Sainz comes across on him, and there's nothing he can do.
I don't know what he was doing. I was there and just turned in like I didn't exist.
I mean, this is the problem with turn 1, isn't it? We said it's a pinch point, and that's exactly what happened. Piastri with his nose down the inside of the Ferrari. I'm not sure if Sainz saw him, but it's such a tight corner, such a slow corner. He had nowhere to go. He got squeezed between the edge of the pit wall and the red Ferrari on the left-hand side, and has come away with some race-ending damage, unfortunately, for the McLaren driver.
Well, that was Piastri on the radio reporting all of that, talking about Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz had locked up his front right, steaming into turn 1. I think came across to the right-hand side, because otherwise he was going to hit the back of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes. And unfortunately, Oscar Piastri's McLaren was there to take the brunt of it. But Piastri then out of this race, a disaster for the Aussie, who's been having such a brilliant weekend so far. His teammate Lando Norris is up into 8th. This is the sound of Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, who is in 4th place and is chasing down Lewis Hamilton for 3rd place as they come through the double left-hander of Fuon.
5% aero balance is pretty big.
So that was Sainz. Tell me about the damage, or the amount of damage. 5% aero balance. What does that mean, Jack?
It means a lot. So to give you a point of reference, if a driver comes in from a run and says, the setup wasn't quite right, I want a bit more front end, a typical aero balance change you would make that would be quite significant might be 2%. So to have a 5% shift from what should be an ideal race setup for Carlos, that's huge. We don't know which direction it's gone in, whether he's got now a very unstable rear end or if he's lost a lot of front end. So he's going to have a lot to deal with, and it's now Alonso coming around the outside into the bus stop. He's showing his nose, he hasn't committed, he's just going to try and shape him up for an exit into La Source now.
Yeah, takes the higher line, cuts back tighter to the apex. There's Fernando Alonso. More grip, less damage, that's for sure. DRS now enabled. The rear wing flap on the back of that Aston Martin opens, but then shuts quite quickly as he stamps on the brakes for La Source. Sainz is struggling here. He's fallen back nearly 6 seconds to Verstappen ahead. And our top 5 are all on that soft compound tyre. Alonso, Tsunoda, Norris, and 6 to 8, all on the medium compounded tyre, along with Stroll, Russell, and Hülkenberg. Everybody else on that soft set of tyres. So the medium runners trying to go a little bit longer into this race before they make those first pit stops, as the writing on the wall and the day goes from bad to worse for Carlos Sainz. At the end of the Kemmel Straight, Fernando Alonso makes that look rather easy with DRS enabled, straight line speed, late on the brakes. Through goes Alonso. The 42-year-old turned yesterday, gets that Aston Martin up into 5th.
The next real battle of interest, which is approaching very quickly, is the Verstappen, Hamilton and Leclerc. Now with DRS wide open, we know how good the Red Bull car is with that DRS enabled, which he'll get along that really long, fast Kemmel Straight. Of course, Hamilton in front of him will get it as well because he's close up behind the Ferrari, but we know how efficient the Red Bull is, and I think it's only a matter of time before Verstappen finds himself with the only man in front of him being his teammate.
Well, lap 4 of 44 here at Spa-Francorchamps for the Belgian Grand Prix. But let's head over back to the Oval with Ellie Oldroyd, with England struggling to make a breakthrough.
They are indeed. Australia are 104 without loss. The target is 384, so they need another 280. Usman Khawaja has just reached his 24th Test 50, but Mark Wood has come on to bowl for England. England looking for that crucial first wicket. 104 without loss, Australia.
Thanks, Ellie. Back here for lap 5 now, or 44 for the Belgian Grand Prix, with myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley and the former Williams F1 driver Jack Aitken. Perez currently leads, having started in second in front of Leclerc, who was our pole sitter. Then it's Hamilton, Verstappen, Alonso, the top 5. But the battles are starting to concertina up behind Carlos Sainz, Jack. He's in 6th, sustained damage with Oscar Piastri into turn 1, and he's got Tsunoda, Albon, Stroll, Russell all queuing up behind him.
Yeah, basically the entire rest of the field are within a second of each other behind Sainz, who is really struggling with that significant damage to the sidepod. We're now seeing George Russell making moves. He's already got past the McLaren of Norris, and he's going past Stroll. Meanwhile, further forward, Tsunoda goes right around the outside of Carlos Sainz, who is completely helpless at the moment. He's lost a lot of performance from that car. I wouldn't be surprised if they just pull him in at some point, because he's not going to finish in the points at this stage.
Lando Norris also struggling. Not a good day for McLaren so far, is it? There was talk earlier in the weekend of McLaren really being set up for the wet. That car with a slightly bigger rear wing. We saw it in the speed traps yesterday. They were down on top speed, and maybe in the dry, when the downforce is not something that you need quite the same amount as you do in the wet, the slippery conditions, maybe that's going to hamper him. He's already fallen back. Lando Norris now in 11th place.
This is the sound of the Williams of Alex Albon, who is next up to try and get through on Carlos Sainz, who, as we've been discussing, has that damage on the right-hand side of his Ferrari in the lower half of the side pod area where it meets the floor of the car. And Alex Albon, who has had a rocketing start to this race, was already up inside the top 10 after the end of lap 1. He started this race in 15th position. And that was Lewis Hamilton saying that for the Ferrari has been off at turn 9 at every single lap so far. So that's the corner with no name, as Albon makes the move down the inside at the bus stop chicane to get his Williams in front of the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz. What did Ferrari do here with Sainz? They just keep him out for as long as possible? He's just going to drop back. He
is going to drop back. The problem is it's so early at this point. They've either got to completely flip their strategy, and I'm not sure there's too much more they can do. The ideal pit strategy really is probably around 12, 13 is when you want to be making your first laps, as Max Verstappen finally gets his way past Lewis Hamilton and up into P3. Here we go.
At the end of the Kemmel Straight then, Max Verstappen, DRS, late on the brakes, gets through on the 7-time champion. Hamilton down to 4th. Verstappen's next target then, 1.1 seconds in front of him, is Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. His teammate leads, but the gap between Perez and Leclerc is just over 2 seconds. It's Perez, Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso then a little bit detached in the top 5. Tsunoda, Albon, the top 6. Then comes Sainz, Stroll, Russell and Ocon in the top 10. This is the sound of Max Verstappen as we see how he made it through on Lewis Hamilton. And Jack, that was fairly straightforward, wasn't it?
Yeah, Hamilton put up some defence, but he left a car's width of space on the inside, and Verstappen was all too happy to take that. And such was the speed difference that he just blew past him before they even got to the braking zone. So in the end, quite an easy overtake for him. And now we see Sainz slipping even further back. He's down to P9. He's lost another place to Stroll. They're quite literally queuing up to get past this Ferrari, and this is really impacting all of these people's races who are stuck behind him. They're losing race time as they sit behind him. The gaps to the cars in front extending by seconds as they lose time behind that ailing Ferrari.
Of course, what no one really knows at this stage is how long are these tyres going to last, because we've been on wets for almost the entirety of this weekend. The practice sessions have been mostly wet. No one's really done a long extended stint. Even in the sprint yesterday, it was all done on wet or intermediate tyres as the first cars start to peel into the pit lane now. But no one's really knowing how long they're going to last. What's the degradation going to be like? So we've got a predicted strategy. We think probably a 2-stopper is the fastest, but no one really knows at this point.
Interestingly, Norris was one of the first people to jump, and he's currently the only car on a hard tyre, and that's one of the question marks is, could we see potentially a one-stop race from those that started on the medium, of which the McLarens were some, the others being the Aston Martin and Alonso sitting pretty in 5th place after having a good start to this race? Could he do a one-stop to the end of the race with a hard?
He's got to go a long way though. It's an early stop, isn't it? I mean, the predicted one-stop strategy probably didn't have cars stopping till much later by another sort of 5, 6, 7 or 8 laps from now. So Norris has gone very early, but as we say, we don't know how well these tyres are going to hold out in these conditions, so maybe it's doable.
Ocon has also come to the pits along with Bottas, as we say, Norris, Magnussen, Ricciardo, our pit stoppers so far, all of them on a medium bar Lando Norris, who has gone out onto that hard tyre. Perez leads, Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso the top 5, Tsunoda, Albon, Stroll, Russell, Sainz still hanging on to a point for the time being in 10th, but he has been falling back and back with every single lap that has gone by after picking up damage in lap 1, turn 1 with Oscar Piastri. That has seen Piastri out of this race. Sainz continues, but at what cost? Because next up, Logan Sargent in the Williams, the American rookie, and Pierre Gasly, who finished 3rd in the sprint yesterday for Alpine, are the next ones to make a move. Sargent looking very bullish indeed in the run down to Blanchimont. Sargent will have the inside line, and he gets it done before they even make their way through the left-hand kink. I imagine Gasly will now line it up inside or outside line into the bus stop chicane. It's going to be the outside line for Pierre Gasly. Late on the brakes, Sargent makes his way through. Sainz comes into the pits. They can't carry on anymore. Sainz has done enough, and in he comes.
Yeah, of course, one of the other side effects of losing downforce on your car is you're slipping and sliding, you're working the tyre harder, so he's probably been killing those softs while he's been struggling with that damage, so now he's swapping onto a brand new set of the medium tyre.
And there was a little bit of work going on. There was one of the mechanics who was just having a look at that hole basically in the side pod, but there's nothing they can do, Mark, is there?
Not at this stage, no. I mean, the sort of the one saving grace, not just for Ferrari but for all of these teams in these dry conditions, is they've got an endless supply of brand new dry slick tyres, so they have free choice, if you like, of what to put on. No one's really having to go to used tyres because they haven't used any all weekend. Up front, though, Max Verstappen now in DRS range of Carlos Sainz's teammate, Charles Leclerc.
3 wide on the Kemmel Straight, Norris in the middle, Albon and Esteban Ocon both get through on the McLaren. It's the Williams ahead of the Alpine, ahead of the McLaren of Norris, and that is really significant as well because they have all made pit stops, so that is position and will come as an on-track move. But Norris on that hard tyre then, struggling compared to the medium tyre runners of Albon and Ocon.
Is it the hard tyre or is it just the lack of straight line pace of that McLaren? It's just a sitting duck on the straights.
So potential rain on the radar, 20 minutes away, not very strong though, nothing like yesterday.
Oh, come on, that was Bono, Pete Bonington on the radio talking to Lewis Hamilton, giving you a weather update. We could do a nice bit of rain in 20 minutes, that would be lovely, thank you very much. The highest, or the top 11 have all made have not made pit stops at the moment. This is the sound of Max Verstappen going down through the gears into the right-hander of La Source, then onto the throttle, chasing Charles Leclerc.
Yeah, very, very close now as he comes down the hill into Eau Rouge, and he'll go up the hill through Radion, keeps it nice and tight. I think he's close enough now. He'll get DRS as they cross the line onto that Kemmel Straight. We'll see the top speed just ramping up, closing right underneath the rear wing of the Ferrari. He goes to the outside into the braking zone, and yeah, no real defence from Charles Leclerc, and Max Verstappen right up now into P2 with only his teammate in front of him.
Who had lap 9 then? Who had that on their bingo card?
We said it would be earlier, didn't we?
Yeah, we thought lap 5, but it's lap 9 that Max Verstappen has gotten into the top 2. This is the sound of how he did it. Up through Eau Rouge, carrying so much more speed, Jack. DRS in the toe of Leclerc. He tried a little bit. He moved to the inside to defend that line.
It's all he could do. It's the only move he had in his book, and Verstappen saw it coming. He braked late and hard on the rubbered line on the outside of the track, swept around, keep the speed up, and then he had the inside for the second part of Les Combes and was just able to take the position. I mean, Leclerc did everything he could. He was trying to break the toe down the straight, took the inside, but at the end of the day, Verstappen was just too strong.
Well, Verstappen then up into second. Only his teammate Perez is ahead of him, 3 seconds the gap. Leclerc in third, Hamilton fourth, and Alonso the top 5. Tsunoda, Stroll, Russell, Gasly, Hülkenberg Hulkenberg, the top 10. Albon, Magnussen, Ocon, Norris, Ricciardo, the top 15. Bottas, Sainz, Zhou, Sargent, the 19 drivers still left in this race, with Oscar Piastri being the only retirement. Lando Norris has lost a couple of positions to Ocon and Albon and Magnussen as well. Norris is really struggling to hang on in this McLaren. Daniel Ricciardo is all over the back of him now, less than a second. He'll get that DRS. So while Norris starts to have to look in his mirrors more and more, the fight develops in front of him with those who've just got through. This the sound of Esteban Ocon chasing down Kevin Magnussen for 12th.
Just looking at Alonso, who's still in P5 on those mediums, first of the medium runners, and he's putting in pretty decent lap times. He's matching Hamilton ahead of him now, who's probably going to be starting to struggle with those soft tyres. So he's going to try and extend as much as he can and just see if he can get a bit of an overlap on the soft runners ahead of him.
Tsunoda into the pits then, and it's a nice quick stop from the AlphaTauri team. 2.2 seconds. Tsunoda, who started this race in 11th, found himself running in the top 7 come the end of lap 1. And where does he feed out? Just in front of the Williams of Alex Albon, and that is crucial for AlphaTauri and Tsunoda, who are desperate for a point-scoring finish. Tsunoda a little bit under pressure all of a sudden since Daniel Ricciardo came back into the fold, out-qualified him in this first race, beat him in the sprint yesterday as well. But Tsunoda having a far better run of things at the moment. But Alex Albon, with fresher, warmer tyres, actually up to temperature, manages to get that move done on Tsunoda. But it might come back to Tsunoda as he tries to fight back at the end of the Kemmel Straight. The other AlphaTauri, Daniel Ricciardo, has also just got through on Lando Norris.
Yeah, an absolutely torrid day for McLaren, really, isn't it? After such a strong weekend up until now. I think they would have been doing a rain dance over the course of last night and this morning, but it hasn't paid off. But there may be rain coming, and could it maybe work in their favour?
Digestion, yellow G2. Yeah, none of this is helping, maybe.
Okay, maybe we are trying here our best as well. So
yeah, I can't understand you. Okay.
Some radio difficulties there for Norris, but it's strange, isn't it? Because even though it's gone from wet to dry, you wouldn't expect it to have such a dramatic drop-off in the dry conditions. Normally at this circuit, if you do have a lot of that lovely downforce, which you give up the straight line speed for, you get the return in the middle sector, which is really long here and very twisty, and it helps with your tyre management, it helps with staying close to people to get the DRS at the end of the lap. But we're just not seeing that from McLaren.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, the problem in race conditions, of course, as opposed to a qualifying lap, is you are a sitting duck with cars behind you with that long straight and the overtaking opportunities. That's where the extra drag that comes with that extra downforce can really hamper you in race conditions.
Fernando Alonso pits, changes tyre, gets rid of those mediums and comes out just in front of Nico Hulkenberg. Alonso going on to the hard compound of tyre, much like Norris did earlier on, but Alonso coming out better track position. He's got a bit of a gap in front of him as well to Gasly, but Hulkenberg, who is on a better run of things, gets to the inside on the Kemmel Straight with DRS, and the German powers his way through. The Haas makes the move on the Aston Martin, getting himself, Nico Hulkenberg, up into 8th spot. But a reminder, Hulkenberg has yet to pit, unlike Alonso. Perez leads from Verstappen, Leclerc, Hamilton, Stroll, the top 5. Russell, Gasly, Hulkenberg, Alonso, Tsunoda, the top 10. Albon, Ocon, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Norris, the top 15. Bottas, Zhou, Sainz and Sargent, the 19 drivers in this race, with Oscar Piastri the only retirement so far.
Looks like it's actually a set of mediums on Alonso there. That graphic on the race standings is incorrect. So he's trying to go with the rest of the field really here. Only Norris on that hard tyre, which doesn't look like it's working well, so he's gone for the safer option in that sense. But surprising to see him pit earlier than the soft runners ahead of him. It does seem like everyone's struggling a little bit for tyre wear, and we're seeing Alonso on board with him now. He's cruising up to the back of that Haas with ease, it has to be said. Pulls out, no DRS on the run down to Blanchimont. He actually backs out of it so that he can get back into the toe before the bus stop. Is he going to send it up the inside? He sits on the outside, forces Hulk to defend a little bit. Nothing doing here, but he's just going to shape him up, make sure that he's close going down into Eau Rouge so that he can get the launch pad of DRS into Les Combes, which is the main overtaking spot here.
Yeah, Nico Hülkenberg and Fernando Alonso came to blows in yesterday's sprint race, and then Alonso pirouetted into the barriers, or just shy of the barriers, certainly into the gravel, after losing downforce and all grip, trying to make a move into Pouhon behind Nico Hülkenberg. He finds himself in that situation once more, but conditions a lot less wet today. Up through Eau Rouge, through Raidillon then, and onto the Kemmel Straight. DRS flies open for Fernando Alonso. The rear wing flap opens, and he gets the move done on Nico Hülkenberg as he slams onto the brakes into the right-hander. Alonso back and ahead of Nico Hülkenberg.
And that was wise, experienced stuff from Alonso, wasn't it? Backed out of the early overtake that wasn't quite on, in the hope, knowing in fact that later in this lap he'd come up against that DRS zone in exactly the right spot, and he used that to find his way through. The other thing, of course, informing strategy, particularly for the guys at the front, the four drivers in the four positions in the front of the field, still on soft tyres. There is a little bit of rain forecast to be arriving at the circuit shortly. We don't think it's going to be enough to force wet tyres, but the longer you can leave it, the longer you can stay out there, the better you keep your options open.
Perez, Verstappen, Leclerc and Hamilton are those top four runners still on the soft compound of tyre. Then comes Stroll and Russell on the medium compound of tyre, though as I say that, I believe Hamilton has just come into the pits, so the first of that top four to dash for the pit lane. He was told rain, but told it wouldn't be anywhere near as severe as what we experienced yesterday. But the weather here in Spa-Francorchamps on the eastern side of Belgium in the Ardennes forest can change in an instant. It's a nice clean stop though from Lewis Hamilton, 2.7 seconds, and he comes out on the yellow-walled medium compound of tyre. Where does he feed out though? Stroll will just about nick through, I think. No, Hamilton does carry the speed, but Stroll will have more on the Kemmel Straight.
Yeah, the battle's not over. That Aston Martin's right in his slipstream, and he's going to have the help of DRS as they crest over Eau Rouge. Hamilton immediately jinking to the left to try and break the toe, to make it harder for Stroll to follow that hole that he's punching through the air. Stroll pops up to the outside. Is he going to go deep on the brakes? No, he backs out of it. He knows the Mercedes is much faster than him, so he just falls into line.
So Alonso definitely is on that medium compound tyre. That has now updated. So the only hard runner is still Lando Norris. But we still don't quite know if that's the reason. He's down in 14th. Is that why he's so slow? Or is it that McLaren... He has had the pace this weekend. He's been a little bit off Piastri, but he hasn't been 14th slowest.
No, he hasn't. He spent a few laps earlier on in this race just tumbling down the order. I think, track temperature very different to yesterday. The conditions in general completely different today than they've been at any other point over the weekend.
So don't forget, Max, use your head, please.
Are we both doing it or what?
You just follow my instruction.
No, I want to know if both cars do it.
Max, please follow my instruction and trust it. Thank you.
Okay, that was the voice of Jean-Pierre Lambiasi, Max Verstappen's engineer, telling Max to keep his head as he was closing in on his teammate Sergio Perez for the lead of this race. And it's a slightly slow stop because Perez came into the pit lane. Sparks fly on the rear of that Red Bull. They do manage to fit all four tyres, but as he pulled out of the box, I think Leclerc and the Ferrari came in and just might have had to slow down and hit the brakes to avoid an unsafe release, but Perez gets out. Verstappen carries on going for another lap. Perez feeds out in second. Leclerc has to try and stay with Perez. He feeds out in third.
So, of course, now Verstappen has got to try and do an overcut on Perez. This is his opportunity to get past Perez without having to actually overtake him on track. He's got clear air now. He's going to try and push into it. We're expecting to see him using up the rest of that tyre and hopefully try and jump him through the stops, unless Red Bull have decided to split the strategies between these two cars.
Well, cue the conspiracy theories. I can see that happening already. But that radio conversation you heard between Max and his engineer was all about this. What Max was thinking was that Sergio Perez was getting a preferential treatment, an early stop, which of course he has the right to do from the lead of this race. As it's turned out, with that stop not quite being perfect, it could be Verstappen who gets the advantage.
We're expecting rain in about 9 or 10 minutes. What are your thoughts? You can get there, or should we box? We'd need to box this lap to cover Leclerc.
Yeah, I can't see the weather radar, can I? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm with Max on this. I don't know why they're asking him. They can only ask him, how do the tyres feel? Have you got any juice left in them? But the call on weather and how fast Leclerc is closing with those fresh and medium tyres it's a hard one.
It's feeling frosty between those two this weekend, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, what he's asking,
they do get on.
They do get on. They've had a great relationship. What he's asking, as Max does indeed come into the pits, he's asking if he can last for another 10 minutes on those tyres, and I guess part of that radio that we didn't hear, the answer to that is no, and in he comes.
Yeah, well, as he makes his way and the mechanics await him, all four wheels are changed and it's a much quicker stop than his teammate. 2.5 seconds for Max Verstappen. Now, where does Sergio Perez come? He crosses the line. Perez will retake the lead of this race. The pit lane exit feeds out after La Source, so you do cut turn one out, but it's still not enough. Perez feeds out and retakes the lead of this race, but Verstappen then 1.8 seconds behind his teammate. Make that 2 seconds now as Perez screams up Eau Rouge through Radion. The fight is on, or is it?
Well, he's going to have to close that gap again, 2.5 seconds, so he's lost a little bit of time to Perez, who, even though he had a quicker stop, but I'm sure he'll be able to do that. We are looking at a radar now, and there's some dark spots looming. On board with George Russell is the sound you can hear. He's closing in on the back of Lance Stroll. These two not yet pitted. They're trying to hold out perhaps for that rain. Russell pops to the outside. He's not quite far enough alongside to challenge him into the first part of Les Combes, but he cuts back again, getting a better line through the exit of Les Combes as they head down into Brussels. It's a tight hairpin. Stroll covers the inside, and there's nothing doing there. They're now into the second sector where it is very, very hard to follow the car in front of you. So the gap's going to go out again. George will have to try and stay close, see if he can pick up a toe on the run into the final corner.
Yeah, 5th is Stroll, Russell is 6th, Alonso is 7th, so Russell finds himself at the moment in a bit of an Aston Martin sandwich as they make their way through the double left-hander of Pouon. In terms of rain, well, the radar said it might be in about 7 minutes or so, but as we see and have a look at the clouds, they are quite grey, they are quite ominous, but they were like that from the start of this race as well. There's a few bits of blue sky that are peeking through, but certainly the sunshine that we saw at the start of this race has gone away.
One of the key things is how much rain. Oh, that was a big moment for Fernando Alonso on the exit of Stavelot coming onto the back straight. He kicked up gravel as he dropped a wheel off the track. He just managed to collect it up, but that was seriously sideways, about as sideways as you want to get in a Formula 1 car, and he still manages to get the toe, get the move done on George Russell into the bus stop. So beautiful driving there from Fernando. We'll have to see a replay. But what I was going to say is one of the key things is how much rain are we going to see, if any. If it's just a light drizzle and you don't need to switch to wets, actually being on a fresher, hotter, thicker set of tyres is going to help you a lot because they keep their temperature much better when there's more tread on the tyre. If you're on an old set like Stroll and Russell, for example, then you're really going to struggle in those conditions, lose a lot of temperature and grip from your tyres.
Lap 16 of 44 then, and the battle for the lead is on. It's Sergio Perez who has it at the moment, but Max Verstappen, who started sick due to a gearbox penalty, has carved his way through the field and now finds himself tucked up neat and tidily right behind his teammate. Coming into the double left-hander of Pouon. Difficult to try and find and make a move here. I imagine it'll be Mark coming into the bus stop chicane.
Yeah, I think he can pick his moment, in all honesty. He's way quicker, Max Verstappen, on this set of tyres. The medium, they started on the softs, both of these drivers, both switched to the medium tyres, and it looks like Max Verstappen way more comfortable. What on earth is Checo thinking when he's looking in his mirrors, thinking, I came out 2 seconds ahead of my teammate just a couple of laps ago. Now he's all over the rear wing of my car. Less than half a second, he's going to get DRS. And here they go. Is this the moment?
Approaching the left-hander of Blanchimont, the slight left-hand kink taken flat out for Max Verstappen. He made an excellent move there back in his Toro Rosso days on the Sauber. Felipe Nasr going side by side and made the move stick, and that was when we all lit up to go, who is Max Verstappen? But couldn't quite make it on that occasion. He closes up once more onto the back of his teammate as they head down the main straight into La Source. DRS for Max Verstappen, closes right up to the back, takes a much tighter line, hits the apex of La Source into the run towards Eau Rouge and Radion. The writing's on the wall, surely, for Sergio Perez.
Yeah, he's just ducking out of the slipstream as he runs into Eau Rouge. He doesn't want to get momentum on him just yet. There's a long way to go on this straight. Now he gets back into the slipstream, takes the DRS. He goes for the outside immediately, and it's easy. He's got so much more speed than Perez, and Perez has to fall back in line behind Verstappen, and that's him into the lead of the race.
Verstappen then on lap 17 of 44, ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez. He'll try and stay as close as he can with him. We'll focus on the battle behind then, shall we? Leclerc is third, Hamilton is fourth, Alonso is fifth, and this is the sound of George Russell, who is in seventh, fighting his way past Lance Stroll. They go side by side at the end of the Kemmel Straight. The Mercedes sweeps around the outside. That becomes the inside, and Russell is through on Stroll for sixth.
They're having a right old ding-dong, these two, aren't they? George Russell and Lance Stroll swapping positions, but it's Russell who comes out on top. Just thinking about Perez and Verstappen, with Verstappen now in front and already pulling away. What is Checo thinking? I mean, I've been karting before, where I think I'm kind of okay in a go-kart, but you get behind a real racing driver, and I think I'll just tuck him behind him. I'll just copy what he does, which is what the position Sergio Perez is in right now. And the racing drivers disappear, and I imagine that's the frustration that Checo has. Same car, they're both excellent racing drivers, but Checo's got no answer for him, has he?
Absolutely none. And the Orange Army that align the track in the grandstands, the Dutch fans celebrating that move for Verstappen to take the lead. Verstappen, of course, Dutch, but he was born just 100 kilometres away from this very track here in Belgium. I think it's worth saying, Jack, as well, or maybe just explaining, we talk about DRS with the rear wing popping open on that main straight and on the Kemmel Straight, gives you an extra boost, gives you less drag, and that manages to increase your straight line speed, right?
DRS, yeah, is a drag reduction system, so it's the rear. And here's signs on the radio.
Rain expected in 4 minutes. What is the rain intensity? 2 to 3.
So just indicating that there might be a bit of rain on its way. But DRS, it's the main plane on the rear wing, the big thing that has all the sponsor logos on it, really, pops open, and instead of forcing that air up into higher behind the car and forcing the back of the car into the track, it opens up and it lets the air pass through, taking away a lot of drag and making the car a lot faster. And it's very important to try and maximise your straight line speed, of course, when you're trying to overtake and you're in the slipstream as well. We're seeing it being used to good effect by the Alpine of Gasly, who's next in line to try and get past Stroll, who's now really struggling on those old medium tyres.
Well, coats are going on in the grandstands, umbrellas are going up. Is the rain here? Has it arrived a little bit early? We're expecting it to arrive around about in sector 1 of this track first, the first part of this Spa-Francorchamps track, which is over 7 kilometres long.
15. Okay, there will be a few spots for a few minutes and then increasing.
So that was Carlos Sainz saying it's raining at turn 15, so that's Stavelot, and that it will begin to increase over the course of the next few minutes. Pit stops are happening. Lando Norris has finally got rid of his hard tyres and has come onto the softs in plumb last. It's worth pointing out, actually, that Pierre Gasly, who's got himself up in 8th, is still on that soft compound tyre, hasn't pitted. Alpine and Gasly trying to run towards this rain.
Well, just to explain that radio message Carlos Sainz got a few minutes ago, when they asked about the intensity, and he said it's level 2 to 3. That's on a scale of 5, 0 to 5. So 2 to 3, reasonably strong rain. Lando Norris, having just made another pit stop, could find himself in an even more difficult position, whereas you're absolutely right. Could Gasly be holding out and time this just well enough that he can go straight from the softs onto an intermediate if that's what's required?
Well, Gasly is involved in this battle for 7th with Stroll and Yuki Tsunoda, so that's nicely battling away. We did have a brief battle momentarily for the lead between the two Red Bulls, but as soon as Verstappen has got by, even on that lap, going quicker, 2 seconds faster.
And this rain will last for around 10 minutes.
That was Charles Leclerc's radio being told the rain will last for about 10 minutes. The umbrellas are up, the hoods are overheads in the grandstands, and on the Kemmel Straight, Gasly has pulled alongside the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll as they head into the braking zone. At the end of the straight, Gasly is through on Stroll as Yuki Tsunoda lurks in the background, ready to make his move on the Canadian as well. But how was that? Verstappen 2 seconds faster straight away as he took the lead.
It does look like he's finally released himself and got fully into his potential. He's gapped Perez instantly, and even with little spots of rain appearing on his visor, which can be quite unnerving, he's pressing on. He clearly feels confident and happy with that car, so I fear that's the last that the field are going to see of Verstappen. But Just keeping an eye, we can see some drizzle, some very, very light spots on the TV now, but it's not enough for the grip to really be affected yet. Lap times are still looking fairly normal. Drivers are still looking like they're pretty comfortable. Perhaps now as they head into turn 14 and 15, Stavolo, where they first saw the rain, it's getting a little bit more intense now.
Even the Aston Martin pit wall have given up on the radars, and they're going the old-fashioned way of sticking a hand out from underneath the gantry on the pit wall to see if it's raining or not.
It's always the best way. You know, all this technology is amazing, but look out the window or stick your hand out from underneath the timing stand. It's an absolute guaranteed detector of whether it's actually falling out the sky or not. Verstappen nearly 4 seconds ahead of Perez out front. A monumental pace on the medium tyres with that Red Bull out front.
Mightily impressive stuff from Max Verstappen here as we start lap 20 of 44 for the Belgian Grand Prix, with rain looming overhead. Time, I think, then to have a check-in with the cricket. Let's head back to the Oval. Ellie Oldroyd, England still chasing that first wicket.
Yes, they are, and my rain radar tells me that it's raining here, but it's definitely not. There are no umbrellas up. I might go and stick my head outside and see if it is, but we're still playing in Australia. 135 without loss, so they're creeping closer. They need less than 250 now to win. Usman Khawaja's on 69, David Warner on 58. Khawaja hit on the head with a short ball by Mark Wood, but he is batting on. 135 without loss, Australia, and the target is 384.
Coverage continues of the Ashes at the Oval on Radio 5 Sports Extra. Right now, we are back with the Belgian Grand Prix with myself, Harry Benjamin. Alongside me is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley and the former Williams F1 driver Jack Aiken. It's lap 20 of 44 in the 12th race of this 2023 Formula One season. Verstappen leads Perez, Leclerc, Hamilton and Alonso the top 5. Russell, Gasly, Tsunoda, Stroll, Ocon the top 10. Albon, Magnussen, Ricciardo, Bottas, Zhou the top 15. Hulkenberg, Sargent, Norris, Sainz, the 19 drivers still left in this race. Piastri in the McLaren is out and retired as the rain is coming down.
Yeah, it's definitely getting more intense now. We're seeing drivers start to back off a little bit. Verstappen has just said it's raining quite a lot at the back end of the circuit on his radio, and lap times have dropped by 3 or 4 seconds a lap, so it's still not quite enough to prompt changing to a wet tyre and an Inter. And actually Aston Martin for Stroll, who's been holding out, trying to stay out as long as he can in case they need the wets, they've come out with a set of slicks.
Yeah, a set of soft tyres for the Aston Martin. Of course, what this means, 3 drivers still to pit, 2 after Stroll comes in now. 2 drivers still haven't made a pit stop, and although they may be waiting for rain, we may not get rain of the intensity that it requires wet tyres. What we could easily get is an incident that brings out the safety car as the circuit gets really slippery and treacherous, and that could be a perfect opportunity for those guys to capitalise on what's relatively cheap pit stop.
Rear right slow on the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, 4.3 seconds, so that cost them 2 seconds, nearly double the ideal pit stop time for Aston Martin and Lance Stroll, who did pit onto those slick tyres, the Red Bull soft tyres, with the rain coming down. But as we say, the intensity of it as such doesn't seem to require intermediate tyres at the moment. This is the sound of Max Verstappen making his way up through Eau Rouge. He's leading this race and has a little bit of a scary moment.
That is one of the scariest things that can happen to you in a race car, having a wiggle right in the middle of Eau Rouge. You heard that he lifted out of the throttle. This is normally an easy flat corner for these modern F1 cars, but he knew that the grip wasn't quite there, and as he went into the compression, the rear just started to move on him, and he got right out of the throttle and managed to keep it on the track and away from those painted curves. But the rain's coming down harder and harder now. It's not gone just yet. It's only going to be a short shower, but can they survive this next 5 to 10 minutes on these slick tyres and avoid having to make a costly double pit stop effectively to go to Inters and then come back to the slick tyre once this is gone?
Well, the rain has arrived here in Belgium. What's the situation, though, in terms of weather at the Oval, Ellie Oldroyd?
Yeah, it's arrived here as well, and the umbrellas went up pretty much as soon as the players stopped for drinks, so the covers are coming on. Australia 135 without loss, with Khawaja on 58, Khawaja on 69 and Warner on 58. The target is 384. The radar suggests that we might not get much more play today. England could probably do with some time for a rethink.
Time for a rethink for England. Time for a rethink for Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo here at the Belgian Grand Prix. Just trying to move on Daniel Ricciardo. Couldn't quite make it work, but he's going to try and fight back down into turn 1. DRS open, slam shut, under braking. This is the battle for 12th place here in Belgium. Rain is coming down and intensifying, but not quite there yet to see anyone dare a move to the pit lane for an intermediate tyre. Verstappen leads Perez, leads Leclerc, Hamilton, Alonso the top 5, Russell, Gasly, Tsunoda, Ocon and Albon the top 10, and our point scorers for the time being. Lando Norris is trying to recover ground after a poor start, made the move onto the hard compound tyre and just been lacking speed. He's down in 17th. This is the sound on board the McLaren man's machine with his mother from Belgium. A half home race for him as he comes to the end of the Kemmel straight through the right hand. A little bit of an adjustment on the steering wheel. It's getting slippery. He's looking at the back of the Williams of Logan Sargent as they come through the downhill right-hander of Rivage round the outside for Lando Norris. That will become the inside into the corner with no name. As the rain comes down, Norris gets the move done and gets ahead of Logan Sargent for 16th. Nicely done from Lando.
Yeah, great battle there between the two. Nice driving from the McLaren driver as George Russell dives into the pits, leaving only Pierre Gasly in P7, still on the soft tyres that he started this race. And with the circuit, I know I said it a minute ago, the circuit's now getting incredibly treacherous. Turn 9, that corner with no name, we've seen so many people sliding off there as the conditions get wetter and wetter. Could this just work out in Pierre Gasly's favour? Should we get a major incident that brings out a safety car?
We're seeing images now of the Red Bull pit gantry and the rain. That is very heavy now and is coming down. This is the sound of George Russell coming into the pits. What's he going to change on to? Can we have a little look at the tyres? The mechanics get to work and they put them on, but they've gone for the softs. They're not going for inters.
Yeah, they clearly don't think it's going to be enough rain, so they're getting them off those old mediums, which are well past their best, putting them onto a nice, hot, fresh set of soft tyres, and actually that's going to be a great help for Russell. But now we're seeing the battle between what looks like the Alpine.
It's Gasly and Tsunoda. This is the sound of the Japanese racer Yuki Tsunoda, who breezes past Pierre Gasly on the Kemmel straight. That move's been coming for a few laps now. Tsunoda finally gets it done. Gasly, a reminder, hasn't pitted and in fact is now the only driver to not pit in this race. He started on the soft tyre, he's still on the soft tyre.
And that is the cost of that long-term strategy, isn't it? They are holding out, looking for an opportunity with a potential safety car, but of course now at this later stage in the race, coming up to around halfway through, these things are starting to lose their grip, they're starting to degrade, and that means the lap times will start to fall away. And as we just saw there, he's going to start tumbling down the order if he stays out much longer.
Yeah, it was a gamble, wasn't it? And it hasn't paid off for those teams that decided to go for it. So they're all losing positions. Gasly is going to die on that hill. If there isn't enough rain in the next 10 minutes for him to switch to a set of wets, then, well, he's going well down the order.
Lando Norris is starting to come alive again in this race after a pretty woeful start. He's just made the move and sweeps round the outside of Zhou Guanyu as they come into the braking zone of Pouhon. Russell is going toe-to-toe with Logan Sargent. Russell gets that move through Stavolo and up into 15th. It's Verstappen who leads this race on lap 24 of 44 as rain begins to come down, but no one going yet for a wet tyre. Perez is second, the gap 5.5 seconds. Leclerc, Hamilton, Alonso the top 5. Then comes Tsunoda, Ocon, Gasly, Magnussen and Albon the top 10. Bottas is in 11th at the moment. This is the sound of George Russell and how he got through on Logan Sargent as they came into the right-hander, then through Stavolo, a nice easy move down the inside. Gasly finally comes into the pits in that Alpine, as does the Williams of Alex Albon, who just nicks ahead of the Frenchman, the Thai racer, out in front of the Alpine driver Pierre Gasly. They feed out in 16th and 17th, and that shows that Gasly has gone onto the medium compounded tyre.
Now on board with Russell, he's shaping up for the move on Guanyu Zhou, and he gets it done easily. No defence from Zhou there, as he knew that Russell was so much faster on that brand new set of softs. He's eating up the cars around him, but I mean, the damage has been done to his race time. He's lost a lot of time staying out on those set of mediums to hope for some rain. He's working his way through the field, but he's got a long way to go to undoing that damage. And it's Carlos Sainz who has retired. He's now in the pits.
Well, you know what? Sainz apparently just said on the radio a couple of laps ago, I think box next lap or else wait for the red flag. And I think that highlights just exactly where his race was at. They didn't have any other options, really. The red flag, maybe that would have come out for an incident, maybe because of a sudden ferocity of weather, hasn't come. Sainz then out of this race. This is the sound of Gasly in the Alpine, and a woeful pit stop, Mark.
It's terrible. They couldn't get the right front tyre off. It took forever to come off, which meant the next one going on was also delayed, and that just compounds really the disaster that has been that strategy. They'd stayed out as long as they could possibly do. They did a long, really good, quite a good stint on that soft tyre, made it last for a long time, and they can potentially make it to the end of this race now on that medium, making it a one-stop strategy from soft to medium. But the longer pit stop has now put him back in the pack, right in amongst traffic. He's all the way back in P17, and as we saw, just coming out of the pits, right behind the Williams of Alex Albon. So not quite working out today for Pierre Gasly.
Okay, we're getting our second phase of pit stops then happening at the moment. Tsunoda, Bottas, Hülkenberg have all just dived for the pit lane, so it's all going to jiggle about a bit in terms of order. Let's focus on George Russell, who continues to carve his way through the field, but is now on the back of Lando Norris, who has also been carving his way through the field, up through Eau Rouge, into Raidillon, down the Kemmel Straight, and with DRS, Russell breezes by way before they even get to the braking zone. Russell then up into 8th, Norris down to 9th.
Up front, we're still seeing the gap expanding between Verstappen and Perez. It's now close to 7 seconds between the two. Leclerc a further 7 seconds behind him, and Hamilton holding on to Leclerc. But now we're seeing it's Daniel Ricciardo in the AlphaTauri who's swept past the Haas of Hülkenberg. That was quite an easy move as well, as Ricciardo pops up to 16th.
Yeah, I'm not sure the strategy's quite worked out yet for Daniel Ricciardo. He's just made his second stop, but he was already down in 17th, 18th. He's come back out on the medium compounded tyre. His teammate, conversely, Yuki Tsunoda, is having a marvellous race. He has just pitted and come out a little higher up in the order. So it is Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Hamilton and Alonso, the top 5 as it currently stands. Ocon, Magnussen, Russell, Norris and Zhou, the top 10, with this next round of pit stops still to play out. The rain, I believe, is still falling, but it's much lighter now. So we were told rain was happening. It would intensify over a few minutes, but then nothing compared to what we saw yesterday, which was pretty much a deluge at one point. Very much now, that window, if there was ever going to be a window to switch to any kind of wet tyre, I'm pretty sure it's gone.
At least in this phase of the race. Still some very dark clouds above the circuit, and as we know, things can change very, very quickly, as they have done here all weekend. Just going back to Daniel Ricciardo, of course his race was really hampered by a disastrous qualifying on Friday, which wasn't anything to do with his pace. He had lots of pace in that car, but stepped over track limits on his flying lap on Friday afternoon, put him all the way back down in the pack, and that's what he's really struggling with, which consequently means that Tsunoda has a real opportunity to stamp his mark on that team, which he kind of has to do, because Daniel Ricciardo's come in, and I have to say, done a wonderful job, almost looking like a team leader in only his second outing.
Yeah, Yuki Tsunoda had such a great start to the year, really, alongside Nick de Vries at the time, who was really putting his mark on that team. 2-point scoring finishes for Yuki Tsunoda, coming in Australia and Azerbaijan, but both just 1 point each time, so he's only down in 17th in the standings. At the moment, he's on for 9th place, another couple of points, but points would be crucial, Jack, for Tsunoda at this stage.
Yeah, he's in a very difficult position, because although Daniel's new into this team at this point in the season, of course, he has driven for the team before when they were Toro Rosso. He's much more experienced. He's a much more senior figure than Tsunoda, who is still relatively early into his career. So, of course, as soon as Daniel stepped into that car and started to get decent pace and results, the team will start to gravitate towards him. And Yuki really needs to nip that in the bud if he wants to overcome Daniel and just try and stamp his authority, as Mark says.
This is the sound of Pierre Gasly coming through the right hand of Stavolo up through the gears, and he is currently chasing Alex Albon in the Williams. Talk of Daniel Ricciardo, we're just seeing a replay of him on the Kemmel Straight being passed by the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg. A DRS move, that drag reduction system, the flap that opens on the rear wing, reduces the drag, gives you extra straight line speed. Can only use it if you are within a second of the car in front of you in the designated zones, which here are along the Kemmel Straight and along the main straight. straight, and that is the move done for Nico Hulkenberg, who gets up into 15th, having started from the pit lane after a terrible qualifying for the Haas man. He's now right up behind his teammate Kevin Magnussen for 14th, and Hulkenberg flying, actually. He just set the fastest lap of the race as well, so 1:49.9 at the moment. Hulkenberg absolutely flying on a set of soft compound tyres.
Another man who's flying, Pierre Gasly, now with a set of tyres that aren't a million laps old. He's hunting down Albon for that final points-paying position. He's in DRS, but it doesn't look like he's going to be able to close down the Williams on the run to Les Combes. On the brakes now, we're on board with Gasly. He closes right up to the back of that Williams car. He's got a lot more grip, but he's not had the straight line speed to use it so far this lap. So now he's going to go and try and follow him through sector 2, stay away from the dirty area as much as he can, open up the wheel a little bit wider through Bruxelles, and going into now No Name turn 9, just trying to get half a nose of clean air from behind that Williams. It's so important to let the aerodynamics of the car work when you're trying to follow someone like this.
Well, the Williams also incredibly quick in a straight line, isn't it? That's a slippery car through the air, so when we get onto that long Kemmel straight, which will be the next major opportunity for him, he's still going to find it hard, I think, even with DRS.
Lewis Hamilton comes into the pits. That's the sound you can hear as the mechanics get to work and change all 4 tyres, and it's a tidy stop, 2.8 seconds for the 7-time champion who pitted from 4th place. Alonso comes through to take that position as Hamilton feeds out behind Alonso. Bit of a gap though, but nice and tidy from Lewis Hamilton. This is lap 28 of 44 of the Belgian Grand Prix. Verstappen leads Perez, leads Leclerc, Alonso, Hamilton the top 5, Russell, Norris, Stroll, Tsunoda, Albon the top 10, Gasly, Ocon, Bottas, Magnussen, Hulkenberg the top 15, Ricciardo, Sargent, Zhou. The 18 drivers still left in this race, with Carlos Sainz experiencing his first DNF of the year and retiring from this race with damage sustained in turn 1 after colliding with Oscar Piastri. And it will come as no shock to you that the other retirement in this race is Oscar Piastri in that McLaren. Both of them out of this race after a lap 1 turn 1 incident. Piastri was out pretty much on the spot. Sainz carried on for as long as he could, but fell all the way to the back of the pack before Ferrari decided to call it a day. Verstappen started from 6th place with a 5-place grid penalty after qualifying due to a gearbox change. He has quickly made his way up through the field. There was a little bit of drama, a little bit of jeopardy as the rain started to come down here in Belgium. We're in eastern Belgium in the Ardennes forest, surrounded by trees and woodlands. As the rain came down, it wasn't heavy enough to trigger anyone to go onto an intermediate or a wet tyre. Pit stops have been happening and continue to happen as the strategy, which was really a bit of an unknown coming into this race, continues to play out. Next to pit is Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari.
And we're seeing he's going to go for another set of the soft tyre from which they started this race with, of course, as well. It feels like everybody's really avoiding that hard tyre after seeing Norris struggle so much on it earlier in this race. Track temperature is still relatively cool, which plays to the softer compounds, and it means that you have to really manage those compounds. If the hard can't fire up, you really need to be soft and have a gentle touch. Now seeing Hamilton make his way past Alonso for position going up into P4. Leclerc's come out just ahead of him, not close enough for him to challenge him on this lap, but he's within 1 second or so. He might be able to get DRS on the next lap if he can stay close enough on this next tour.
Yeah, it's been interesting actually with the strategy. As you said, everyone's starting to move back to the soft tyre. Certainly the soft tyre starters moving from soft to medium, now back to soft, the preferred tyre, which seems like a long stint, still 15 laps to go. But I think everyone's looked at that first stint of Pierre Gasly where he did 23 fairly solid laps on the red walled soft tyre without too much in the way of degradation, and they're looking at that thinking, yeah, we can go to the end on this. 15 laps on a soft tyre in these conditions today, that's definitely doable. So I think the front runners now, soft tyre shod, Leclerc and Hamilton, the faster of those 2 tyres of course, will be looking to get to the end of the race with a little bit more pace hopefully.
Yeah, Verstappen leads on the medium tyre by almost 10 seconds to his teammate Perez, but I think we're getting, hopefully, a little bit of a battle on our hands here for the final podium place. Charles Leclerc has just come into the pits, and with 15 laps to go here in Spa, was only just in front of Lewis Hamilton, who came in the lap before, but he has now eked out that gap to over a second. Alonso as well lurks behind in 5th, but the Ferrari does seem to have a bit of an edge in terms of pace over the Mercedes at the moment, but never say never when it comes to Lewis Hamilton as Sergio Perez comes into the pits, and as you quite rightly predicted, Mark, but goes on to those soft compounder tyres.
Well, with Hamilton, that was an attempt at an undercut on Leclerc, going onto that soft tyre, trying to use the extra performance for a fresh set. As I said earlier in the race, everyone's got plenty of new tyres this weekend because they haven't been using the dry tyres much at all. So Hamilton tried to put a fresh set on, try and use that pace to catapult himself past Leclerc, but Leclerc then had to immediately cover that, covering exactly the same strategy as 1 lap later, and it's worked out so far for Leclerc staying in front.
Yeah, Leclerc third, Hamilton fourth, and Fernando Alonso was behind, but he has now decided to come into the pits and done the exact same thing, got onto that soft compound of tyre. Max Verstappen has just been told over the radio that he is going to box at the end of this lap. That means he's going to come into the pits and change his tyres as well, as Alonso feeds out onto the track and into 5th ahead of Russell and Norris.
Closest battle on track now is for the final points-paying position. The 2 Alpines of Ocon and Gasly both stacked up behind with the Williams of Alex Albon, so it's a real fight for that final position, and it looks like Gasly wasn't able to use those fresher medium tyres to his advantage when he came out of the stop. He got held up too long behind the Williams, has lost that freshness and is now sat back.
Good job. Thank you, guys.
Fernando Alonso giving his seal on approval on the Aston Martin pit stop there. 3.3 seconds. He managed to feed out then in 5th, and just over a 1.2 second gap to himself and George Russell behind the Mercedes. This is the sound of Max Verstappen, who slows down to 80 kilometers an hour and heads into the pits. The Red Bull mechanics get to work, and it's another neat and tidy pit stop from Red Bull. 2.3 seconds, and he feeds back out and will retake the lead with no problems, with Perez 27 seconds behind him now. Verstappen, Perez, Leclerc, Hamilton, Alonso the top 5, Russell, Norris, Stroll, Tsunoda and Albon the top 10. And what a difference a day it makes, right, Mark? We had such a different race yesterday, different conditions, different people running in the top 10. You know, we talk about that battle for this final points-paying position, which Esteban Ocon, I think, has just managed to get through on Alex Albon for and make his way up into 10th and steal that final point. But Gasly in 12th, next to make a move on Albon, was up fighting for 3rd yesterday.
You're right, it has all changed with the conditions, hasn't it? There's no McLaren in any real points, any place of real...
Well, that's a big what-if of today, isn't it? What could Piastri have done?
It was, but I think, given that it's now very dry, and I think we are seeing the signs of that car performing better in the conditions that we've seen earlier in the weekend. Norris kind of backing that up, currently in 7th position, but not really setting the world alight. But what I'm really interested in is how do we view Sergio Perez's performance, because we've been saying all weekend that if Verstappen wins on any given weekend, Perez has got to be right there behind him in 2nd. But today he started well in front of his teammate, and already, perhaps inevitably, Perez now in 2nd place. So does he look at that and say, well, yeah, this is exactly what the team needs me to do? Or does he look at it thinking, I should be winning this race?
I think undoubtedly he wants to be winning this race, but he's had a serious reality check over the last month or two with a lot of unforced errors, a lot of mistakes, a lot of poor performance. And maybe he has set his sights a little bit lower. I think he has to, you know, today, this is the performance that Red Bull want from him. They want him to be that reliable 2nd place position, supporting his teammate, not causing too much trouble probably. And, you know, he's filled out that role well so far. It is heart-wrenching, you know, as a driver to accept that position, and that's what he's got to be dealing with at the moment.
This is the sound of Pierre Gasly up through the gears as he slings his Alpine into the double left-hander of Pouon. He is chasing 11th place Alex Albon in the Williams. Gasly's teammate Esteban Ocon has just got through on Albon and gotten up into 10th spot to nick the final point at the time being, and Ocon is now closing in quite rapidly on Yuki Tsunoda in his AlphaTauri in 9th, and the Japanese driver will be wishing for this race to come to an end as soon as possible. It's lap 32 of 44 here at the Belgian Grand Prix. Less laps, but they are long laps, which is the reason why this track, the longest on the calendar, over 7 kilometers in length, which is why we talk about rain. You can be seeing it at turn 1 but not seeing it in turn 12, or the other way around. That is just the disparity between one part of this track and another. Into the bus stop chicane, the final corner of this track, and onto the main straight, up through the gears for Pierre Gasly. DRS open, the rear wing flap opens.
Use a lot of a tyre on an outlap, Max. I'm sure that was sensible.
I mean, like you said, it's been quite frosty between the two of them this weekend. Pretty blunt from GP. Yeah, but I'm not sure if that was I mean, they're so comfortable out in front. I don't know if that was just a bit of banter, if he was being serious.
You can never tell with GP because his tone of voice is always the same. But you also almost feel like GP is the kind of guy to go, I'm not angry, I'm disappointed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, what he's saying is, on the outlap, and the team know this, they can tell very clearly from the data through things like temperatures and, of course, lap time, how much of that tyre performance, which has a given set of performance over a given stint, and as I said earlier, quite a long stint on this soft tyre to get to the end of the race, and he's just showing some concern that Max might have used a little bit too much of that performance in the outlap on the very first lap out the pit, so he's just got to manage that to the end, but I don't think it'll be too much trouble.
I mean, Max clearly decided that was the moment to strike, wasn't it? To close up on Perez and get, as if to prove a point, he pops in a fastest lap, saying, no, I've got plenty of tyre left, GP, don't worry. So I don't think it's a major concern as we're seeing the Alpine of Gasly going around the outside of the first part of the pit path. Very brave stuff to try and get 11th place from Albon, and they're still side by side going now into turn 14, still side by side, big power slide from both of them as they race to get on the power, and Gasly comes out on top.
That was sublime from Pierre Gasly over the course of 2, 3, 4 corners side by side. Gasly and Albon, the Alpine getting the upper hand in the end and through on the Williams. Gasly now on the medium compound tyre trying to close up to his teammate who's on the soft compound tyre, Esteban Ocon, in 10th for that final point, but Albon is not giving this one up without a fight. Closes in on the Alpine through the bus stop chicane. This time Albon will have the DRS down towards the source. This is the sound of the Williams down through the gears into the right-hander. And as Gasly starts to escape up the road, Albon will be reluctantly having to look at his mirrors more and more because Valtteri Bottas and the Alfa Romeo has joined the party, and up through Eau Rouge will be looking to make a move down the Kemmel Straight. Can Bottas get this done? It's going to be difficult for Bottas because Albon's also going to get DRS along with Bottas. So Albon tries to retake the 11th place from Gasly. They go side by side at the end of the Kemmel Straight into the right-hander. Gasly sees him coming and sees him off. Albon has to settle and slot in behind as Bottas continues to watch and wait for his moment to pounce.
The straight line speed of that Williams is just immense. It's probably the only thing that can challenge the Red Bull, but Albon's tyres are clearly gone. He's sliding all over the place. He's got no traction. Just jumping on board for a replay with Gasly for that move. Just creeps around the outside of the first part of pit path, gives him the inside for the left-hander, but Albon hangs on around the outside. Then they dive into 14, a right-hander. Gasly on the outside, just squeezing Albon as much as he dares to the inside curve, and they both jump onto the power and get a little bit of a kick, but with the fresher tyres, Gasly is able to get the job done, and now through the second sector he's pulled away from the Williams, so no longer has the helping hand of DRS to help hold off Bottas, who's right behind him as they go onto the back straight.
And all that talk about Max Verstappen using his tyres a bit too much, he's still pulling away at an incredible rate, now 12.5 seconds up the road from Sergio Perez.
This tyre had reasonable deg in the first stint. I'd ask you to use your head a bit more.
That was once again Gianpiero Lambiase talking to Max Verstappen. Feels like it. There is a bit of an edge so far this weekend, more so than normal.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely not banter anymore, is it? He's quite deadly serious, it sounds like. I mean, he has a very comfortable advantage, 12.7 seconds ahead of Perez, but Perez himself only 3.8 ahead of Leclerc, so they're not, completely out of this. With 10 laps to go, if that soft really starts to fall off a cliff, then, that gap will be gone in an instant.
And I would argue that drivers tend to be more risk takers than the engineering team sat in the garage. So the engineers are looking at the data, and all they're seeing is the potential pitfalls of getting to the end of this race in P1 and P2. Whereas Max Verstappen, he's out there having a bit of fun. He knows he's got a great car. He wants to show what he can do with it, doesn't he?
It's a bit like, I heard Adrian Newey speaking in the week, talking about his time, or here's Verstappen again.
I can also push on if we do another stop, a little bit of bits of training.
No, not this time.
Now his GP there just trying to keep Max's ego in check a little bit. He wants to go longer because he knows he probably can and get a gap sizable enough in front of his teammate to come in for a free stop essentially and not lose any position on track. Perez is 13 seconds behind Verstappen at the moment as he makes his way up through Eau Rouge. Adrian Newey was saying throughout this week that during his time at McLaren in the Mika Hakkinen years, they had such an advantage. They were so far ahead, but they took their eye off the ball, and then suddenly Eddie Irvine was coming into play right at the end of the year, and they had to really suddenly cling it back.
It can easily be done. Yeah, absolutely, and particularly given the advantage that Verstappen has right now. I mean, Jack, no driver wants to be out in front with pace in hand and told to sort of ease off and just bring it to the end, because it feels like a dull 10 laps to go.
Oh, not in the way that he was told. I mean, he was being told off a bit like a child would be, and I think he might have taken that a little bit to heart and sort of wanted to come back and say, look, I've got plenty of pace, what are you talking about, this is easy. And yeah, it's easy, as you say, to get a bit lax in these situations. I mean, Leclerc on that last lap, he was a lot faster than yes, he was. He was a lot faster than Perez. He was 0.6 of a second faster and closed the gap. So he's actually coming onto the two Red Bulls, because the gap between Verstappen and Perez is quite stable at the moment. So I don't think GP's fears are completely unfounded.
Battle for 10th in the final points, battle for 9th, I should say, in the final points up for grabs in the top 10. Yuki Tsunoda in the AlphaTauri currently occupying 9th. Esteban Ocon has closed right on to the back of the Japanese racer in his Alpine. Tsunoda 9th, Ocon 10th, and Gasly a few seconds back now in 11th. But how long can Tsunoda get his elbows out for? Tsunoda is on the soft compound tyre, as is Esteban Ocon, so it should be a fairly straight fight. But that Alpine looks like it's got a little more pace up its sleeve, but Tsunoda has the track advantage. They come to the braking zone after the the left-hander of Pouon.
Yeah, he's trying to stay nice and close there. He's got more grip clearly than Tsunoda, but just trying to, again, dodge that dirty air. Coming through turn 14, the last real traction zone before the back straight. There's a little bit of a gap. Tsunoda has a big kick of wheel spin, manages to keep it all fairly in check, and he's got a nice gap over Ocon here, so I think he's going to be safe going through into the bus stop. It's whether Ocon can make sure that he gets a good run out of La Source turn 1 on the long way down to the Camel Straight, where it's the best overtaking opportunity on this track.
I suspect Esteban Ocon also has just a half an eye on what's going on behind him, with his teammate having come out, having made a later pit stop. He's on the medium tyre, but Gasly 3.8 seconds behind. He will want to put a car in between him and his teammate, because he does not want to come up against a situation where he might potentially have a faster teammate closing in on him towards the end of this race.
Esteban Ocon comes through La Source, the right-hander, has to have a couple of goes on the steering wheel to get the traction out of La Source. Now, Tsunoda, uphill, 35-metre elevation change through Eau Rouge, onto Radion and on to the Kemmel Straight, where DRS becomes activated for Esteban Ocon. The flap on the rear wing opens up, reduces the drag if you are within a second of the car in front of you, and you get an extra straight line speed advantage. But on that occasion, Ocon not really able to close up. That 36 of 44 in the closing stage of this Belgian Grand Prix. Verstappen leads by 14 seconds to Perez. Leclerc is third. Hamilton and Alonso the top 5. Then it's Russell, Norris, Stroll, Tsunoda and Ocon the top 10. Gasly, Bottas, Magnussen, Hülkenberg, Ricciardo the top 15. Zhou, Albon and Sargent, the two Williams, 17th and 18th, and the last of our runners in this race. We have lost Carlos Sainz after damage sustained with an incident to Oscar Piastri in turn 1 of lap 1. He carried on as long as he could, but in the end Ferrari called it a day for the Spaniard, his first DNF of the season, whilst Oscar Piastri never recovered from that collision into turn 1 and pulled off onto the side of the road. And those are your 2 retirements from this race so far.
It feels like at the front of this field, the only person with any pace in hand is indeed Verstappen. I mean, you can question whether he's using his head or not, but the gap now over nearly 14 seconds over his teammate. Everyone else behind, Perez seems stuck. Leclerc seems stuck 4 seconds back. Hamilton stuck 2.5 seconds behind him. And Alonso with a 25-second gap to Hamilton in front. There's nothing much moving other than Verstappen, who seems like he can do whatever he wants.
Well, while we have a few drivers that seem to be stuck here in Belgium for the Formula 1, let's see what the updates are for the Netball World Cup. England versus Scotland in Cape Town. Lindsay Chapman.
Thank you very much. Yes, we've just got underway here. Just 3 minutes gone in this one. England 3, Scotland 2. Both teams on centre pass though, so no turnovers to report at the moment, but no doubt this match will get more feisty as we go along.
Thank you, Lindsay. Commentary of the Netball World Cup is available on the BBC Sport website. Back here on BBC Radio 5 Live, we are bringing you live coverage of the Belgian Grand Prix, the 12th race of the 2023 Formula 1 season, with myself, Harry Benjamin, the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, and the former Williams F1 driver Jack Aitken. It's lap 37 of 44. Verstappen leads Perez, Leclerc, Hamilton and Alonso the top 5. Russell, Norris, Stroll, Tsunoda, Ocon the top 10. Gasly, Bottas, Magnussen, Hulkenberg, Ricciardo the top 15. Zhou, Albon, Sargent, the 18 drivers left in this race with Sainz and Piastri both retiring. And there is a nice battle developing. It's outside of the points for the time being, but it is involving Nico Hulkenberg in 14th in the Haas, Daniel Ricciardo in 15th in the AlphaTauri, and Zhou Guanyu in 16th for the Alfa Romeo. So no points, but certainly pride up for grabs there.
Just looking at Carlos Sainz, looking pretty full on in the garage. He has stuck around to watch, which is more than some people in his position could say. I mean,
what would you do? Storm away, on the plane home?
It's a pretty miserable existence being in the garage while the race is still going on, I can tell you that.
Well, we all remember Kimi Räikkönen ending up in a jacuzzi halfway through the Monaco Grand Prix, and whilst I was waiting for him to come back to the garage. So just thinking about Hulkenberg, you just mentioned him in 14th place in this battle. He started, of course, from the pit lane. Here's Verstappen.
It's so windy. I can hold the wheel really tight.
Yeah, roger that.
It's a strange message, isn't it? Poor you, holding the wheel tight. There you go. You can manage it, Max. Come on. Hulkenberg started from the pit lane, but of course the reason he did that was he was able to change components on his car. He broke the Parc Fermé rules, hence that pit lane start. But that means he can set the car up for the race, set it up for overtaking. You don't have to worry about the compromise that most people had to set their cars up to take into account qualifying as well. And that might be part of the reason that Hulkenberg making so much progress.
Esteban Ocon at the end of the Kemmel Straight goes side by side with Yuki Tsunoda into the right-hander. Oh, so close to contact, but they both give each other the room. Inch perfect from the Alpine and the AlphaTauri. Brilliant racing. Tsunoda trying to defend that 9th place for all his might, but in the end, Ocon had the upper hand, had the speed and the skill, and managed to make his way through. But that got a bit tight, Jack.
He got incredibly tight. I think you could have slipped a piece of paper between the two there. It's brilliant driving from both to avoid contact. Tsunoda pushed him as far as he dared to really try and force him to bail out before they got into the left-hander of Leclerc there, but couldn't make him do it. Ocon just had too much speed coming in from the braking zone. But that was an important move because they were all closing on Stroll, who is one of the only drivers who is on a one-stop at the moment. Whether he's going to carry on with that set to the end is doubtful because he's still got, well, actually, with just 5 laps to go, he's going to have to. But he's not quick, and these guys, they're all catching him. This is I'm talking about Ocon, Tsunoda and Gasly, who are all lapping much faster than Stroll in 8th place.
Yeah, Tsunoda then down to 10th, and Gasly, Bottas are a couple of seconds behind him in 11th and 12th, so Tsunoda will be desperately trying to cling on for that 10th place position, which, if he can hold it, will be his 3rd point scoring position of the year, and it will be a 10th place of the year so far. Very similar. Who was it last year? Was it Lance Stroll, who all of his points finishes were 10th at one stage in his Aston Martin? This is the sound, though, of Yuki Tsunoda's teammate, Daniel Ricciardo, in his 2nd Grand Prix back in a Formula 1 car with AlphaTauri. Had to start from the back. Work to do for the Australian. Has got himself up to 15th at the moment and is 6/10 behind Nico Hulkenberg in the Haas, but he's got Zhou Guanyu, who carries so much pace in that Alfa Romeo, up through Eau Rouge, through Radion and onto the Kemmel Straight. The Chinese racer sticks his Alfa Romeo to the inside at the end of the straight. DRS usage in action, late on the brakes for Zhou Guanyu, and he makes the move stick. Zhou through on Daniel Ricciardo. Zhou up to 15th, Ricciardo down to 16th.
Miserable race so far for Ricciardo. He's spent most of the race being stuck behind other cars. Even if it felt like he had the speed, he hasn't been quick in the straights. And going on board with Zhou for a replay, both of them had DRS because Ricciardo was close enough to do so behind the Haas, and it wasn't enough. The Alfa Romeo was so much faster, and he just must not be enjoying his time this afternoon in that car.
Yeah, disappointing for Ricciardo, disappointing for both Williams, I think. 17th and 18th, and I think we had higher hopes from them coming into this weekend. They've shown promise over the course of the changeable conditions through Friday and Saturday, and in the dry conditions I kind of thought, well, maybe that will really come alive. Maybe this is really an opportunity for them to show their high-speed pace that they have around this high-speed circuit, but not today. 17th and 18th, in fact, the last two runners still going during this Belgian Grand Prix.
Yeah, we really thought they'd have more. Albon's had 2-point scoring finishes in the last 4 races. Was hoping that this Belgian track with its long straights would suit the car a little bit more and yield more than 17th place. He might get a little bit more before this race is done. He might get 16th, because as he goes up through the gears, this is the sound of Albon, moves to the inside of Daniel Ricciardo on the main straight into La Source. Albon takes the inside, bumps over the curb and emerges ahead of Daniel Ricciardo into the approach of Eau Rouge.
Daniel gave him that effectively. He didn't fight it one bit because he wants to be behind him going through Eau Rouge, maybe to get the DRS and have the better opportunity of overtaking him back into Le Combe. He's stayed relatively close. He does have DRS, but not nearly enough. Meanwhile, further up, it's the Alfa Romeo of Guan Yu Zhao, who's on the outside of Hulkenberg, and he goes all the way around the outside to get the move done for 14th.
Zhou is the man making all the moves right now. 2 overtakes in 2 laps. First was on Daniel Ricciardo, then it was Nico Hulkenberg. Zhou gets himself up into 14th and now tries to chase down a 1.5-second gap to Kevin Magnussen, and then comes his teammate. Albon did get through on Ricciardo and did also have DRS to help him down the Kemmel Straight as well, off the back of Hulkenberg. So I think the effect Ricciardo was looking for wasn't quite as advantageous that he would have been hoping if Albon also didn't have DRS.
I think Ricciardo's tyres have gone, to be honest. His 17-lap-old mediums he's on at the moment, but he seems squirming out of the corners, trying to get the power down, the back end sliding, and that just then overheats the tyres even more, and you start to get this big degradation starting to occur, and gradually, as the laps tick down, so does your performance.
Verstappen now 18.8 seconds ahead of Perez. Leclerc is 3rd, Hamilton 4th, Alonso the top 5. This is the sound of Alex Albon round the outside of Blanchimont. You've got to be a brave man to do that, and he does do that. Albon gets through on Nico Hulkenberg. The Haas drops back a position. Albon claims 15th.
Is he listening to our commentary?
I was going to say, you've done the reverse curse there, Mark. Well done. We'll go on board with him on the exit of Stavelot. He's clearly got a lot of pace in that car. He was able to follow very closely through the high-speed corner, gets the toe, doesn't even wait until the big braking zone of the bus stop, goes to the outside of Blanchimont, very fast, flat-out corner, leaves just enough space on the inside for Hulkenberg, and it's a brilliant move, brave bit of driving. And we're going to see another battle here. Actually, it's already happened. Ocon has got past Stroll for 8th place.
3 laps to go then of this Belgian Grand Prix. Verstappen leads by almost 20 seconds from Perez, Leclerc, Hamilton and Alonso, the top 5. Russell, Norris, Ocon, Stroll, Tsunoda still clinging on for that final point in 10th. Then comes Gasly, Bottas, Magnussen, Zhou and Albon, the top 15. Hulkenberg, Ricciardo and Logan Sargent 18th and last of our drivers, with Carlos Sainz and Oscar Piastri both out of this race. I tell you what, for Lando Norris up in 7th, it has come back for him. It could have been a much more awful race, really, for Lando. So it's damage limitation to get back up into 7th.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think at times he would have wondered what on earth was going on with his car and potentially his strategy, but it has worked back in his favour. And yeah, 7th place is a reasonable haul of points. His teammate, of course, out. So from a team perspective, it's not been a good day, especially given the great weekend they've been having so far. Out front, though, Verstappen's still going quickly, still putting in fastest laps. I mean, he's 19, nearly 20 seconds ahead of his teammate with just 3 laps to go. I mean, it feels like he's just proving a point now, isn't it?
Ocon has just made up another position, and he has gotten up into 8th spot in front of Lance Stroll. So Stroll, that move was coming for a little while, and Stroll on the one-stop strategy then, holding on for 9th at the moment. Tsunoda 1.6 seconds behind him on lap 42 of 44. So Ocon 8th, Stroll 9th, Tsunoda now in 10th. The Alfa Romeo of Zhou Guan Yu is now very quickly on the back of Kevin Magnussen coming into turn 1. La Source, and 0.4 of a second the gap between 13th place man Magnussen and 14th place man Zhou. Then is Albon Ricciardo, who has just gotten through on Nico Hulkenberg. So you say his tyres were going off, Mark, but managing to make a move on Nico Hulkenberg. I mentioned Zhou, he does get through at the end of the Kemmel Straight, and through he goes in front of Kevin Magnussen into 13th position.
Yeah, that was a good bit of driving, and Albon still fighting to get past the Haas of Magnussen there. He's trying to have a look on the outside of turn 9, but can't quite do it and falls back into line. Hamilton coming in now for a pit stop. He's got a free gap behind him to Alonso to put on a fresh set of mediums and maybe try and go for fastest lap. That would be ambitious, wouldn't it?
Interesting, he's gone for mediums and not the softs with just a lap to go. That seems like an odd decision given they've got an abundance of tyres in that garage, but he had a free pit stop because Alonso was a long, long way back.
I mean, I can't imagine he's going to be able to do the fast stuff anyway. 48.9 it's currently at with Max Verstappen, of course, who else? But that would be quite a jump in pace for Hamilton, as you say, on those medium tyres. Back to the battle further down the field, unfortunately out of the points, but Albon on his charge. He's back on the back of the Haas going into Blanchimont. Little lift of throttle as he loses the downforce and he gets to the inside. Little bit of a miscommunication there between the two drivers, but up the inside of Magnussen to take the place for 14th.
Yeah, Albon 14th, Magnussen 15th, Ricciardo 16th, Hülkenberg 17th, Sargent in 18th. That is how the back of the field looks. But a penultimate lap of running then, and Albon and Zhou are the ones making moves in the latter half of the field. Up front, though, that gap pretty secure for Max Verstappen, over 20 seconds between himself and Sergio Perez.
Just getting a replay of that. It looked like Magnussen was almost trying to let him through on the inside, Albon going into the bus stop. He opened the door and even let off the throttle, it looked like, and Albon was expecting him to defend. Went to the outside and had to brake check himself and just get out of it before he went into the back of that Haas. But managed to avoid a mess and got through that cleanly. I have to say, as we look towards the front of the field, I'm going to say Leclerc's done a good job today, hasn't he? Just quietly got on with his race, held Hamilton at arm's length, not really made any mistakes, and on a day when the other Ferraris had an absolute shocker, he's coming home with a podium, it looks like.
Yeah, I think it was probably as much as Leclerc could hope for, really, wasn't it, today? I mean, third place. Are they the second quickest car? Probably not, over in the grand scheme of things. So to finish third behind two Red Bulls, I think is a decent result for him. It's interesting now with the closing laps just ticking down. In fact, the final lap Max Verstappen's now on. A mix of strategies, of course, throughout this race, and they are starting to just play out. It's why we're getting a bit of movement up and down the field, with teams now finishing this race on different tyres. We don't always get that, and that's why we're getting different pace from different people at this closing stages.
Just a few more corners to go then for Max Verstappen. The orange flares have already been let off in the grandstands that surround this Spa-Francorchamps circuit in the east of Belgium, in the Ardennes forest. Verstappen, born just a stone's throw away from this track, has a huge amount of support. Had a little bit of work to do starting from 6th, but the writing was on the wall for the Dutchman. Through Blanchimont, the fast, flat-out left-hander, where Verstappen arguably made and began to start making a name for himself, where he made a brilliant overtake there in his Toro Rosso days. But it's one final corner to go for Max Verstappen, who will come across the right line, and it will be another win in Formula One in 2023 for Max Verstappen, who takes the checkered flag by over 20 seconds to his teammate Sergio Perez.
I mean, they joked at the end, but he had a pit stop's worth gap over Perez after that exchange with his teammate GP, didn't he?
I tell you what, Max Verstappen's won this race. He's drove a wonderful weekend. He's going to be fuming because Lewis Hamilton is about to take the fastest lap of this race on those new medium tyres.
He will be fuming, won't he? Perez does come across in second. Leclerc rounds out the podium in third. Charles Leclerc back on the podium after 2 races off it as Lewis Hamilton comes across the line. Does he get the fastest lap? Yes, he does, and he nicks that extra point.
I eat my words, Lewis Hamilton. That was a very, very nice lap. Blows past the 48.9 previously set by Verstappen.
Now, this highlights just how far Verstappen won. I know that it has to a full lap after they cross the checkered flag, because you come through La Source and then you turn in yourself and come the back way through the pit lane. But he's already out of his car as Hamilton was crossing the line in 4th. But it is the 2-time champion
soon to become a 3-time champion, who puts his steering wheel back in his cockpit, stands tall. It's 8 wins in a row for Max Verstappen in Formula One. He continues his dominance. He continues his fantastic display of racecraft as he celebrates with the team. A handshake with Sergio Perez, his teammate, who just didn't have enough to compete, but did have a better race of recent times to come home in second. And Charles Leclerc in that Ferrari climbs out back on the podium in third.
Yeah, good day for Red Bull, wasn't it? Almost perfect by that fastest lap point that was nicked at the end by Lewis Hamilton. But first and second is exactly what Red Bull need to be hoping for every single weekend with the car that they've got. And for once in quite a while, they've delivered exactly that.
Hamilton was 4th, Alonso rounded out the top 5, Russell, Norris, Ocon, Stroll and Tsunoda. Oh, so close to actually getting Stroll for 9th place, but Tsunoda does get a points finish, and that will be Tsunoda's first points finish since the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, so round 4 of this season. So good news down at AlphaTauri. Gasly just missing out in 11th, Bottas was 12th, Zhou Guanyu was making moves in the latter stages of this race, managed to get up into 13th, as was Alex Albon, he was 14th, Kevin Magnussen 15th, Daniel Ricciardo had it all to do from the back of the grid, but didn't really come together for the Aussie in the second Grand Prix, back down in 16th in front of Logan Sargent and Nico Hülkenberg. Tried it all, started from the pit lane, changed all the bits and bobs you can on that car, and only 18th for the Haas man. Work to do for the German and that team moving forward. 2 retirements from this race, Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari and Oscar Piastri in the McLaren after coming together in turn 1 of lap 1. Piastri out on the spot, Carlos Sainz limped on for a few more laps, but in the end the prancing horse team deciding to call it a day. So 18 finishes, 2 retirements and 44 laps complete of this Belgian Grand Prix as we now head into the summer break. But it's certainly been a season so far all about Max Verstappen, who celebrates with his team, a hug with Christian Horner, and absolutely fantastic racing. I mean, Jack, what else is there to say on Verstappen? Just continues to break the records. He's only got one more win in a row if he gets Zandvoort next time out, and he'll equal Sebastian Vettel most consecutive race wins.
I'm sure that'll be on his mind. It'll be
congratulations, Charles, your 27th podium in Formula One.
Here's Brundle talking to Leclerc.
Quietly very competitive this weekend, but difficult to have an answer to the Red Bulls.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've had quite a positive weekend on our side in terms of pace. Of course, the race, it went good on my side, but a shame for Carlos, as I think we had a good pace. So that is good. When you look at the Red Bull, we still have a lot of work to do, especially in terms of race pace, because degradation and everything, they are quite far ahead still.
And Lewis was pushing quite hard behind you. Were you confident you had him covered off?
Yes, until I've been told to do some fuel saving, and this was quite big at the end of the race, so there I was struggling a bit more, but the pace was there to keep Lewis behind, and then I knew that he was going to pit for the fastest lap, which made my life a little bit easier.
I saw you putting on the bands. Is there a significance to those bands you were keen to get on?
Well, actually it's a brand from Monaco, and I'm very proud of wearing them, so I always have them on me.
All right, good stuff. Congratulations again.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That was Charles Leclerc there, our third place man, speaking to Martin Brundle, who's conducting the interviews as Sergio Perez now steps up to the mic.
Congratulations, Sergio. Second place today. How do you feel about that race?
Yeah, it was a good race for the team. They started really well. We had a great start, so managed to get through Charles, which was one of the targets of today. And yeah, from then on I was just doing my own race, and then Max came through in the second stint pretty fast, so nothing I could have done there. And then afterwards it was just about making sure we brought it home safely without too much damage in the car.
You had a few difficult races, but a brilliant drive in Hungary last weekend and another second place today. Are you getting back on balance and going well?
Yeah, certainly. I really look forward to don't leave the podium anymore from now until the end of the year. So it's been a bit of a rough patch, but I think we overcome, and today we managed to score great points for the team.
And you head into the summer break then with some confidence.
Yeah, definitely. I really need this summer break. It's been a bit intense the last few races, so I look forward to it and come back very strong for Zandvoort.
Congratulations again.
Well, Sergio Perez then, a better race of recent times, back onto the podium and following up with Max Verstappen once again winning in Formula 1.
Congratulations, Max. You've won the last 10 starts in Formula 1, including the sprint races. You seem like you can win from anywhere, anytime, any place.
It's a new spot, that's for sure. P6. Yeah, I mean, I knew that we had a great car. It was just about surviving turn 1. I could see it was all getting really tight. I've been in that position before as well myself, so I was like, I'm just gonna stay out of that, and it worked out. And then from there onwards, I think we all made the right overtakes, moves. I just got a little bit stuck in the beginning in a bit of a DRS terrain, but once that cleared, I could do my own pace, and again, it's really enjoyable.
Now, we heard your great friend and your engineer, Gianpiero Lambiesi, saying, slow down, you're using the tyres too much, but you didn't seem particularly interested in that message.
I did slow down. Of course, we all look at the numbers, we look at the wear of the tyre, and, this track is super hard on the tyres, so you don't want to do any unnecessary things, so that's what we did till the end.
You did have one fright, though, when it was raining a little bit in Eau Rouge and Raidillon.
Yeah, that's probably the worst corner to have a moment, but yeah, it was tricky in those laps, so it was raining because you could see that it was raining, but not how much exactly, and I had a little sideways moment. Luckily, nothing happened, but it's definitely a corner where you don't want it to happen.
Another brilliant drive. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Summed up perfectly there by Martin Brundle. Another brilliant drive, Jack, and I mean, quite rightly, he looked the happiest out of the three of them. Perez had the lead, took it early on when he needed to, but really, as we all said from the beginning, it was just a matter of when, not if.
Yep, and Perez sounded a little bit, like he'd come to terms with that. He said there was nothing I could do. He came through so fast. The best thing was just to let him go and then try and bring it home safely after that. So he wasn't even trying to think of compete with Max, and that's the stage that this dominance has gotten to. Max is really beating them almost before the race has even started. Charles as well, he had reasons to be happy, I think, after this race, but he seemed pretty muted, and it's just this dominance from that team and that combination of driver and machine is really impressive.
It's quite staggering. I thought that was interesting, actually, that comment from Perez, in that he said, in the second stint, Max just came through so quickly and there was nothing I could do. But normally that's the kind of comment you hear when there's a tyre offset or they're on different strategies. So, he came through so quickly because he was on a different type of tyre or a fresher tyre. That wasn't the case here. They were both on basically the same strategy, and yet Verstappen was just so much faster, and it was almost like Perez has just resigned himself to that. He said there's nothing I can do, but that's just driver versus driver at that point, and I think that is literally the state of play right now.
Well, as they enter the cool-down room to quite literally cool down, Leclerc is there first, and back on the podium for Leclerc. Of course, he was second in Austria, but 9th and 7th in the last couple of races. So, Jack, I think even though he knew he was never maybe going to be on for the win, I think he'll take the positives in that third place finish, considering the nightmare that his teammate had this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he said they felt like they had good pace this weekend, so for Ferrari to actually capitalise on that and make sure they came home with that podium and holding Hamilton off for pretty much the whole race, it has to be said, was no mean feat at a track where overtaking is so easy. So it was a really solid race for Charles, and shame for that Carlos couldn't really even show his pace from the first lap after the damage that he picked up, but going into the summer break, that was the boost that they needed.
Interesting and slightly funny little moment in the cool-down room there, where Checo and Charles Leclerc, who were already in there, Checo had put his stuff in Max's position, in the P1 position, and Max just sort of walked in and calmly picked up all of Checo's stuff, moved it over to the P2 position and put his own stuff down in P1, which I thought was quite funny.
Power move.
Exactly.
Ultimate power move, isn't it? Talk about mind games.
What about the cat throwing? When's that going to start between these two?
Well, the thing, we can't get a Rosberg-Hamilton situation because Rosberg was able to... I'm sorry, Sergio. Rosberg was able to challenge Lewis, wasn't he? He was up there with him. Right. As Perez takes his cap off, not to throw at Verstappen, just to place down as they continue their chat. Who else was a standout in that race then? I think if we a day of two halves for McLaren, Piastri, so much hope what could have been there. Jack Norris, a disaster of a start, but then clawed back a little something with a 7th place finish in the end.
Yeah, they did manage to get something out of it, but a hard day after the highs of the sprint race, and poor Oscar, he's going to be sat there thinking what could have been.
Yeah, it'll be an afternoon that, you know, the last afternoon where Piastri wanted to be watching, because he knows how good he is around here. He's really on a high, and he would have wanted to show that again today. He didn't get the opportunity. I think the other sort of winners and losers, obviously the Ferrari of Sainz being the other big loser in terms of that opening lap contact, but in terms of here we go, the podium's about to start, but I think Ferrari happy with Leclerc, Sainz bit of a disaster.
Yeah, well, as we continue to do the rundown of that, we talk about second best team coming into this weekend as well. That really is the fight. But, I mean, Leclerc had the upper hand on this occasion. The Ferrari was there, but then it was a Mercedes 4th, Alonso 5th. Is that the order?
It seems that way. I mean, I think Fernando did a great job to maximise the results today, and that they seem to have a good strategy as well. But he never looked like he was going to be able to challenge the Mercedes, and even George Russell in 6th place was closing fairly well on him and did a good recovery job himself after starting fairly far down the order by his standards. So, yeah, I would say that the Mercedes still has the upper hand at this stage. It's a pendulum that's swinging back and forth with these upgrade packages that are coming through at the moment.
Russell's really struggled this weekend, hasn't he? Of the two Mercedes drivers, it's been Hamilton that's been by far the most comfortable. Russell just really, I mean, he just scraped through most of the qualifying sessions, and a long way really behind Fernando Alonso. Not really, or certainly not really able to challenge him consistently, whereas Hamilton was comfortably able to stay in front.
And we saw between the two teammates of Mercedes, there's a little bit of tension rising at the moment, isn't there? There's been some miscommunication, some tripping over each other in the qualifying sessions, getting in the way. It's not quite as harmonious as things were at the start of this year.
Yeah, well, speaking of that tension, you alluded to it before. Those, as Max Verstappen stands on the top step of the podium, those messages between himself and his engineer Jean-Pierre Lambiase, GP has a tone of such where you never quite know if he's being serious or sarcastic, but it seemed at any other weekends other than this to always be, you know, fairly light-hearted, but this weekend it seemed like Verstappen was almost crossing over that line. Well,
I mean, I can't wait for the social media memes which will inevitably follow, but yeah, the exchange that happened in qualifying, which I thought was it wasn't Max Verstappen's finest hour. He really let rip. It was a lot of swearing going on, and really what he was doing was criticising the decision coming from the engineer, who has in that moment quite a lot more information to hand over and above what Max has. So I always feel it's difficult to sort of take those things. Having been a team member myself, this is a team sport, and the driver's as much of a team as anyone else in it. So I always sort of feel, and I don't know, Jack, if you have a different view on this, but I always feel the driver has no real right to get that angry when everyone in the team is actually just trying to help them do the best job possible.
I think drivers always regret doing that kind of a rant, and you're absolutely right. It is a team sport. You don't have the right to go off on someone like that, especially when they have a valid point. And the hard thing is for GP on the pit wall, Max keeps kind of proving himself right. You know, it's painful because he said to Max, you know, watch out, don't overdo it on these tyres. They have fallen off quite badly for others in the first stint. And Max says, yeah, I'll be fine. And then he is fine because he manages them so well and his pace is so good, and he kind of, you know, validates it for himself. But then GP is absolutely right to be warning him as well. You know, they're both right in their own way. And Max needs to respect that position from his team as well.
Well, look, there is clearly plenty to discuss and dissect from the Belgian Grand Prix, and we will do so, and you'll be able to hear that on the Checkered Flag podcast later this evening on BBC Sounds and wherever you get your podcasts. But that is it from Belgium. 8 wins in a row for Max Verstappen. Formula One is next back in action in Zandvoort after the summer break, which we now enter in 4 weeks' time. We'll be back in action in the Netherlands. Can Max Verstappen make it 9 wins in a row? Well, we'll have to wait and find out, Steve.
Probably. That's the short answer, isn't it? I think he probably will. Let's get that out of the way. Thank you very much, guys. Brilliant. Harry Benjamin, Mark Priestley and Jack Aitken there. The Belgian Grand Prix at Spa won, obviously, by Max Verstappen by 22 seconds to Sergio Perez, Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, who finished 4th. So they've been able, Ellie Oldroyd, to dissect the F1 for us. I think we're getting to the stage now where we can almost dissect the day's play here at the Oval.
It is looking a bit like that at the moment, isn't it? The covers are